This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. Those are two things you can be sure of every episode. Everything else is a toss-up. Here's what we got for y'all. Vaccines won't be delivered for a while, but when they are, they'll only be worth it if people are willing to take them. We'll tell you more about how vaccine confidence has waned during the pandemic. Plus, we'll open up our phone line to talk about why millennials are so burned out and what has been a truly exhausting year. But first, here's what you need to know right now. We told you how the surge of mail-in ballots may turn election night into an election week, with results taking longer than usual to tally. The president has been quick to say he plans to contest them if he doesn't win. Now he's using that as a reason to push through his Supreme Court nomination.
I think this will end up in the Supreme Court, and I think it's very important that we have 9 justices, and I think having a 4-4 situation is not a good situation.
President Trump has said he plans to have the vacant seat filled before Election Day. He plans to announce his pick on Saturday, and Republican senators say they have the votes to secure his pick.
Mama, can't you see? Mama, can't you see? What the system's done to me? What the system's done to me?
Major cities across the country saw protests for racial justice reignited in the last 24 hours after Kentucky's Attorney General announced while one officer was indicted for wanton endangerment, there were no charges directly for the police killing of Breonna Taylor. In Louisville, 2 police officers were shot Wednesday night. One was released from the hospital and the other is recovering after abdomen surgery. Law enforcement there arrested 127 people during protests. In at least 2 other cities, drivers rammed protesters during demonstrations. In Denver, Colorado, a woman was hit but not badly injured after a driver pulled into an area where protesters were gathered. In Buffalo, New York, a person was taken to a medical center after being struck by a driver near Buffalo City Hall. Back in Louisville, Taylor family attorney Ben Crump offered his thoughts on the AG's office not pursuing further charges in Taylor's killing.
We stand here today to say that there is no justification for the murder of Breonna Taylor. And we will go to our graves proclaiming that Breonna Taylor did not get justice from the Kentucky Attorney General's office.
But the ruling isn't uncommon for fatal on-duty shootings by law enforcement. Under criminal law, the fact that Taylor's boyfriend fired first mattered more than any missteps from the police department, despite details that her boyfriend was legally carrying a firearm and fired because he thought there was an intruder. Some states have taken steps to try and hold officers more accountable, but in a situation where police are facing an armed individual like Taylor's case, it's always harder to prosecute. The officer indicted for wanton endangerment was charged for firing his gun wildly and endangering the lives of Taylor's neighbors. Now there are calls to release the full investigation.
I trust the people of Kentucky with the truth, but they need to be able to see the truth, read the evidence, look over what a grand jury may have seen or the investigators or the attorney general looked at.
Cases of the coronavirus don't appear to be spreading in K-12 classes as much as once thought. New research shows the infection rate in schools are far less than what's found in surrounding communities. This does not mean the risk of contracting the coronavirus is 0%, but researchers say it does point to the fact that adolescents and kids may not be a key component for that spread. Of course, there are a lot of variables that still need to be ironed out, like case count reporting. Not to mention, it's only been a few weeks since school started. But it is an interesting contrast to the spread we've seen among students in college towns. Tom Cruise could be headed to space to work on a one-of-a-kind film, which apparently isn't a Mission Impossible movie, and to be honest, this isn't that surprising. The Space Shuttle Almanac, which documents every major space launch, showed Cruise will be flying in a SpaceX ship. He's scheduled to take off October of 2021, and film director Doug Liman will also be on board. It was first reported back in May that Cruise and SpaceX founder Elon Musk would be working together on a project with NASA to shoot the first narrative feature film in outer space. A NASA administrator said in a tweet he hoped popular media is used to inspire a new generation of engineers and scientists. As we all know, Cruise likes to perform his own stunts, so would that be easier or harder with no gravity? In recent weeks, we've talked about vaccine development, clinical trials, the need for diverse subjects, vaccine distribution, estimated time of delivery, etc. But none of that really matters unless people are willing to take an FDA-approved vaccine. And as Newsy's Kat Sandoval reports, vaccine confidence is waning.
Okay.
When an FDA-approved COVID-19 vaccine finally rolls out, will you take it? A recent September Newsy Ipsos poll found a little more than half, about 56% of Americans, said they'd be interested in getting a vaccine, compared to 34% who said they won't. But compared to July numbers, interest in getting a vaccine decreased.
It's slightly unfair to ask people whether they would take something that they don't know anything about. So until we have the data on the actual vaccines, I think people are reacting to a lot of different things besides the vaccine itself.
Phyllis Arthur helped launch several vaccines in the U.S. and internationally. She says lack of vaccine trust is due to the political landscape, how people feel about vaccines overall, science, and the government. She said until we have adequate data on approved vaccines, there will be this skepticism. Our study also found Black respondents were not as interested in taking a vaccine when compared to their white and Hispanic counterparts. One of the factors could be historical mistrust. In the past, Black and Native American people in particular have been abused and unethically experimented in the name of science.
One of the things that is missing are messengers from each of the communities that are expressing these same issues. African American physicians, Hispanic American physicians, Native American physicians, or nurses, talking about these issues clearly to the public and to the communities that they serve.
The largest African American physician organization, the National Medical Association, hopes to address mistrust by establishing a task force that will vet approved COVID-19 vaccines for Black communities.
We have concerns about undue political influence on decisions being made, both at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the FDA.
The FDA commissioner said there will be a thorough review process and science to guide their vaccine approval.
FDA will not authorize or approve a vaccine that we would not feel comfortable giving to our families.
But Dr. McDougall cites President Trump's praise of hydroxychloroquine, the FDA approving it for emergency use and then later revoking that authorization.
We want to serve as that bridge to help lower that level of mistrust, because if a safe and effective vaccine is developed, we want our community to have access to it.
Dr. Todd Woolen from Shots Heard Round the World, a pro-vaccine social media network, has pushed back anti-vaxxers with science. He says he's already seeing anti-vaxxers sowing mistrust on potential COVID-19 vaccines.
We already see mounted anti-vaccine campaigns against a potential vaccine that doesn't even yet exist.
Kat Sandoval, Newsy, Chicago.
One thing about this pandemic, with all this time on our hands, you never really know who's gonna call.
We take a step away from the noise and spin to really hear the stories that need to be told. Newsy cuts through.
Every so often, we partner with the good folks over at Ipsos from at least 6 feet away to survey Americans on a wide range of issues. Our latest survey turned up some pretty interesting findings on voting and the impact of COVID-19. Here's what we found. The pandemic has prompted many voters to seek out ways to cast their ballots without actually going to a polling place. A third of US adults plan to vote by mail or absentee ballot in this year's election. Among those people, about half are Democrats and 1 in 5 are Republicans. With an influx of mail-in ballots this year, election experts have said that Americans should expect an election week instead of an election night this go round. COVID-19 has had a pretty wide-ranging impact on how we go about our daily comings and goings, broadly. And when it comes to things that could impact the 2020 elections, Democrats are most concerned about COVID, while Republicans are most concerned about fake news. And half of US adults say they view the president less favorably because of his handling of the pandemic. And that's not the only thing dragging down his approval rating, as 42% say the release of the tapes from Trump's conversations with Bob Woodward basically weren't a good look and made them feel less favorably toward President Trump. The release of those recorded interviews rubbed folks the wrong way because early in the pandemic, President Trump acknowledged that he knew the virus was deadly and admitted to downplaying it so not to make anyone panic. So today we have a new segment for you. Newsy's Cody LeGros has been isolated in his apartment like everyone else, and he's gotten himself a nice little landline. And we know when Cody calls, he definitely has a very unique story. This is Christian.
It's your boy. What it do?
Okay, so a few different things. Why do I have this phone here? Why are you calling me? I mean, we're right in the middle of a show.
I figured I should call a burnout to discuss burnout. You know what I'm saying?
Well, drag me then. Also, what do you know about burnout?
Probably. You knew me in college. I know a few things. But here's what I do know about burnout. Anne Helen Peterson knows more than the both of us, and she is the Baroness of Burnout.
Millennials, have you ever felt that you can't even? Perhaps you're trying to recall a time when you could, but you just can't. Run errands, pay your bills, find a hobby. Why do those things when you can reflect on the system that's preventing a generation from achieving adult milestones and the ability to feel authentic joy about the future? You see, you could be experiencing burnout, and Anne Helen Peterson knows all about it. She wrote that BuzzFeed article about burnout that likely got shared across your entire office because, it us. And her new book, Can't Even: How Millennials Became the Burnout Generation, gives a language to the precarity millennials are living through. Namely, owning 1/7 the wealth that boomers did at our age while holding more debt than any generation in history. And the first thing we can't even deal with? Zoom calls.
So I can't see you. It's weird.
You can't see me at all?
No.
Did that help at all?
I saw an icon of your face come on briefly. Can you see me?
I can see you. Well, it's probably a good thing you can't see me. I'm sitting on a pillow. I'm trying to get centered. It's a mess. I'm like, if anyone's going to get it, it's the burnout queen, Anne Helen Peterson.
I put on makeup for the first time since May today for this interview. So.
Hey, me too. I'm in a button down and jib shorts. So as millennials, we're more broke, we're more anxious, we're more depressed. What do we have going for us at this point? Is it anything?
I think we have our anger.
Yes.
I think that we are at a breaking point. We are one of the richest nations in the world, and everyone I know is overworked, exhausted, scared. So there's something broken there.
I feel like everyone I know is casually in 10K of credit card debt. And we're all just like, yeah, it's a part of being in your 20s. And I'm like, this can't be right. It can't be.
Okay, so I'm not friends with money managers, but Anne's got a point. And her book focuses on how millennials got here, and here, and how the pandemic made it all worse again.
I think of the pandemic as this great clarifier. So I think something, as simple as getting unemployment insurance, that has always been a huge problem for millions of Americans, but we haven't thought of it as a societal problem because somehow it's not affecting enough Americans. Now the question is, are we going to actually address those huge cracks in the foundation, or are we going to continue to try to do this patchwork of incremental nothingness?
Can't Even unpacks burnout birthed by college at any cost.
And you spend really the first 10 years just paying off interest.
Or by being a person of color in America.
I think burnout accumulates through all different components of your identities.
Or our most toxic relationship, the one with our phone.
We don't know what we would do without it, but at the same time, we resent it and we want less of it in our lives, and we don't know how to achieve that.
Peterson says the American dream is a myth for millennials, but if we stick together, we have a chance.
You can't fix your personal burnout until we fix societal burnout, and that means fixing it for everyone.
Are millennials screwed? Can we have capitalism without burnout?
Right now we have capitalism that is largely unregulated. So when you regulate capitalism, you can make it a more humane capitalism.
Ultimately, Peterson's book gives words to the worries of millennials.
It gives us a language to describe what we're going through. And once you have that language, then we can have conversations and move forward. Hopefully, I think that it will lead to places of change and, small revolution.
Have you seen Arrival with Amy Adams? She's a linguist and she finds the language,
It's their language.
You're Amy Adams is what I'm saying. Thank you very much for providing the language.
Of course, my pleasure.
Well, as promised, that was unique. And as always, I appreciate you calling. Maybe next time, not during the show, we can just kind of take PTO and have a little kiki.
I think PTO is essential, and since you offered, I'm assuming the trip's on you. All right.
All right.
Staycation.
All right, bye. So between that and all the robocalls from voting organizations, I'm definitely changing my damn number.
We're working hard to get you the news you need.
We dig a little deeper on the stories of the day
That's why we're here.
to help start making sense of it all.
The president paid his respects to Justice Ginsburg earlier today, saying goodbye to one justice while mulling over who will take her vacant seat on the highest court. As we've said earlier, the timing is causing contention between Democrats, who want to wait until after the election to fill the seat, and Republicans, most of whom are all systems go. As Newsy's Willie James Inman reports, this will be President Trump's third time making a pick like this and could change the dynamics of the Supreme Court.
President Donald Trump is again looking to make his mark on the Supreme Court, something experts say could further shift an already conservative court.
So here, having really a staunch member of the liberal side of the court, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, replaced by a president who has a very different perspective, President Donald Trump, really could shift the court significantly in a more conservative direction.
This would be President Trump's third pick for the court in his first term. If confirmed, it would be the most since President Richard Nixon appointed and received confirmation of 4 nominees in his first term.
I've spoken to many, and we're getting close to a decision. We're going to be doing it on Saturday. We're going to be meeting on Saturday. A lot of paperwork to do, and I think it's going to go very quickly.
The timing of the nomination has drawn complaints from Democrats. They point to the precedent set by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell after he blocked hearings for President Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, in 2016. Saying it was too late in Obama's term. Despite the optics, appointing justices and federal judges has been a key focus for Republicans, with President Trump appointing over 200 judges to the federal bench, something that could impact America for decades to come.
Judicial appointments has been a focus of Republican strategy. We've seen that really play out in the lower courts, particularly when sometimes Democratic presidents haven't moved as quickly to fill all possible vacancies. But President Trump and his Republican allies certainly have moved very quickly with regard to federal district court judges and federal court of appeals judges.
The High Court is expected to take up a case involving the Affordable Care Act this fall. There may be other landmark challenges involving Roe v. Wade or voting rights, but it's hard to predict how justices will move on a particular case.
A lot of presidents have discovered that once they put people on the court, the loyalty is to the court. Now, you can get an idea how people will vote on certain things, but the court's docket is very broad.
Urofsky says we should be paying attention to how the court could interpret future challenges involving everything from bioethics to the internet, especially if the president appoints a younger nominee.
What happens now is hard to say. I have some colleagues who have tried to do some predicting on this. And one of them has suggested that what we really ought to be paying attention to is how nominees think about science. There is no doubt in my mind that over the coming 2 decades, we are going to see a lot of computer-related cases coming up before the Supreme Court.
The president is expected to announce his nominee for the Supreme Court on September 26th, setting the stage for what basically will be an expedited approval process because it typically takes months to get a nominee through the Senate. And we're just weeks away from the 2020 election. Willie James Inman, Newsy.
Here's something you don't have to wait until Saturday to do. Hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. We'd love to hear what you think about the show. Bonus points if you can tell me where to get one of those black robes with the lace collar. We're now 40 days from the election, and I promise we're not going to keep a daily countdown, but you should probably know that. With an unprecedented amount of voters eligible to mail in their ballots this year, it's important to know some common reasons mail-in ballots get rejected. In this installment of our Vote Smarter 2020 series, Newsy's Stephanie Liebergen explains what you need to know to make sure your mail-in ballot isn't denied.
Why might a mail-in ballot get rejected?
By missing a deadline, using the wrong color pen, failing to sign the envelope or to get a signature of a witness if that's needed, or anything else that's sort of part of the administrative package that you have to return to an election official.
The rejection rate is much higher for absentee ballots than it is for ballots cast in person.
People choosing to vote from home take on more responsibility to make sure their ballot and return envelope are filled out correctly. The most common mistakes include missing information, missing the deadline to return it, or a mismatched signature.
Young people, people of color, people for whom English is not their first language, and overseas and military voters, all more likely to have their ballots rejected because the signature doesn't match.
Voters should pay very close attention to the instructions that come with their mail-in ballot and the return envelope. Some states don't provide return envelopes with prepaid postage.
In 2016, 99% of the ballots were accepted that were returned. That leaves 1%. It's not a huge percentage, but when you start multiplying that across the country, that's a lot of ballots.
Stephanie Liebergen, Newsy, Miami.
That's it for us, gang. What a week, right? I'm going to spend the next 72 hours relearning how to exhale. But we'll catch our breath by Monday when you can watch more In the Loop, same time, same place. More top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.